The text that shattered everything. The message arrived at 3:17 a.m. like a digital knife to the heart. Cora's phone buzzed against the nightstand, pulling her from restless sleep. What she saw on the screen would have broken a weaker woman, but Cora wasn't weak. She was about to become dangerous. Just married Rebecca in Vegas. Been screwing her for 10 months. You're pathetic, Cora. Thanks for funding my bachelor party with your grocery money. Face with tears of joy. Below the text, a photo of her husband Blake grinning beside his coworker, holding up marriage certificates in front of a neon chapel. If you're ready to witness the most savage revenge story you've ever heard, smash that like button, subscribe to Formidable Revenge channel, and comment where you're watching from. This woman's response will leave you speechless. Blake Thompson had always been careless with details. That sloppiness would cost him everything. Cora stared at the message, her pulse steady as winter rain. 6 years of marriage evaporated in pixels and cruel emojis. The house felt different now, not like a home, but like a crime scene waiting for investigation. She didn't cry. Tears were for victims, and Cora was already transforming into something else entirely. Her first move was surgical precision. By 3:45 a.m., every credit card Blake carried was cancelled. The joint accounts he'd been bleeding dry for his business trips to Vegas, frozen. His access to their shared assets, severed with digital efficiency that would have impressed a Wall Street trader. Blake had made one catastrophic error: he'd married his mistress while still legally wed to Cora. Bigamy. A felony in Nevada and their home state of Colorado. But Cora wasn't calling the police yet. She had bigger plans. The locksmith arrived before dawn, a grizzled man who'd seen enough domestic warfare to recognize the signs. Emergency lock change, she'd told him. My husband just committed a felony. By sunrise, Blake's keys were worthless metal. His garage code, reset. His fingerprint access, deleted. The house that bore only Cora's name on the deed was now his fortress, and he was locked outside its walls. Cora showered, dressed in her sharpest business suit, and drove to work like any other Thursday. Her colleagues noticed nothing different. They had no idea they were looking at a woman who'd just declared war. The real genius of her plan wasn't the locks or the cancelled cards. It was what she'd found buried in Blake's laptop before he left for Vegas, evidence that would turn his betrayal into his destruction. Blake's betrayal cut deeper than infidelity. It was systematic theft dressed as love. For 18 months, Cora had watched their savings dwindle. Blake's explanations came smooth as silk: market's rough, babe. My commissions are down. Meanwhile, he'd been funneling money to fund his double life, expensive dinners with Rebecca, weekend getaways he'd called work conferences, even the engagement ring he'd bought for his mistress while wearing Cora's wedding band. The grocery money he'd mocked in his text? Cora had been skipping meals to stretch their budget while Blake splurged on his affair. But Blake had underestimated who he'd married. Cora wasn't some suburban housewife who'd crumble at the first sign of betrayal. She was a forensic accountant who'd built her career unraveling financial deceptions. Hunting down hidden assets was her specialty. Every business trip Blake claimed was documented in his phone's location history. Every cash withdrawal had a timestamp. Every lie left digital fingerprints. The evidence painted a picture of calculated cruelty. Blake had been planning his escape for over a year, slowly draining their resources while positioning himself for maximum damage. He'd even transferred ownership of his car to his mother's name, thinking he could hide assets in divorce proceedings. Cora spent her lunch break in her office, door locked, assembling a dossier that would have impressed federal prosecutors. Bank statements, credit card records, phone logs, location data, social media evidence, Blake's affair mapped out in spreadsheets and documentation. But the crown jewel was buried in his deleted browser history: Blake's research into Nevada's quickie divorce laws. He'd planned to claim abandonment after his Vegas wedding, painting Cora as an abusive wife who'd driven him away. The stakes were clear: Blake intended to destroy her reputation, steal her assets, and leave her emotionally and financially ruined. He'd calculated every move except one: he'd picked the wrong woman to betray. Blake's first counterattack came through family. Cora's phone exploded with calls from her mother-in-law, Margaret Thompson, whose voice could strip paint at 50 yards. "You locked my son out of his own home," Margaret shrieked. "This is theft. Kidnapping. I'm calling the police." The police arrived within an hour, 2 officers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else than mediating a domestic dispute. Cora met them at her front door with Blake's bigamy confession loaded on her phone. "Ma'am," the older officer said after reading the Vegas text, "your husband just admitted to a felony. We can't force you to let him into property you legally own." Blake stood behind the officers, his Vegas tan fading to splotchy red rage. Rebecca cowered beside him, her white sundress wrinkled from sleeping in whatever cheap motel they'd found. The triumphant glow from their neon wedding had already curdled into panic. "She's being vindictive," Blake snarled. "I made a mistake, but she can't just steal everything I own." Cora's smile could have frozen hellfire. "Everything you own is in those boxes in my garage. Your clothes, your gaming console, your collection of vintage beer bottles. Take it and go." Margaret pushed forward, her perfume weaponized. "What about his rights? His belongings?" "His belongings are boxed and ready. His rights ended when he committed bigamy." Cora's voice carried the authority of someone who'd studied law alongside accounting. "Would you like me to explain Nevada Revised Statutes 201.160 regarding polygamous marriages?" The legal jargon hit Blake like ice water. For the first time, his swagger cracked. Rebecca's face went white as she realized the magnitude of their Vegas mistake. Blake's sister Ashley chose that moment to arrive, her BMW screeching into the driveway like backup cavalry. "What did this psycho do to you?" she demanded, rushing to Blake's side. The gathering storm of his family felt like validation. They'd always treated Cora as an outsider, the accountant who'd trapped their golden boy. Now their true colors bled through their fake concern. But Cora had prepared for this too. Blake's campaign of destruction was just beginning, and she was ready to meet it with overwhelming force. Blake's war against Cora exploded across social media like a digital plague. Within 48 hours, every platform told the same poisonous story: Cora was an abusive, controlling wife who'd driven Blake into Rebecca's arms. The narrative painted him as a victim of domestic manipulation, finally free to find real love. Margaret Thompson led the charge with weeping Facebook videos. "My son suffered in silence for years," she sobbed to her phone camera. "Cora isolated him from family, controlled every dollar, made his life a prison. Thank God he found someone who appreciates him." Ashley's Instagram stories were more vicious, photos of Blake looking depressed at family gatherings, captioned with accusations about Cora's emotional abuse and financial manipulation. The comments section became a feeding frenzy of shared outrage and sympathy. Even Rebecca joined the assault, posting a lengthy essay about rescuing the man I love from a toxic marriage and painting herself as some kind of romantic savior. The lies spread like wildfire through their social circles. Former friends began choosing sides. Coworkers whispered in hallways. Blake's version of events felt believable because it was crafted by someone who'd spent months planning this character assassination. But Blake had made a crucial error: he'd underestimated the thoroughness of a forensic accountant. While his family waged their social media war, Cora's friend Marcus, a cybersecurity specialist who'd always found Blake insufferable, was digging deeper. The deleted messages Blake thought were gone forever were recoverable by someone with the right skills and motivation. The recovered data was devastating: months of Blake mocking Cora to Rebecca, bragging about his financial manipulation, even joking about her pathetic attempts to save their marriage. Screenshots of him calling her boring and frigid while planning his escape. Most damning was Blake's confession to Rebecca about his master plan: "Once I'm divorced, I'll claim she hid assets and demand half of everything. She's too stupid to realize I've been documenting her abusive behavior for months." The recovered messages revealed Blake's true strategy: frame Cora as an abuser, claim victim status in divorce proceedings, and walk away with maximum financial gain while destroying her reputation. Marcus packaged the evidence like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Every cruel text, every mocking conversation, every calculated move Blake thought he'd hidden, all of it ready for public consumption. But Cora held back. The timing had to be perfect. Blake's most devastating attack came through Cora's career. He'd called her boss, claiming Cora was stalking and harassing him and Rebecca. His performance was Oscar-worthy. The concerned husband worried about his safety, forced to contact authorities because his unstable ex-wife was becoming dangerous. The accusations hit Cora's professional reputation like acid. Forensic accounting required absolute trust and credibility. Even the hint of personal instability could destroy years of careful career building. Her boss, Patricia Wells, called Cora into her office with the expression of someone handling unstable explosives. "I need to ask directly, are you harassing Blake and his new wife?" Cora sat across from Patricia's desk, watching 6 years of professional respect evaporate. "He's lying. I can prove it." But Blake had been thorough. He'd manufactured evidence, screenshots of threatening texts that looked like they'd come from Cora's phone, fake voicemails of someone who sounded like her making menacing calls, even staged photos of his car with apparent scratches he claimed were from Cora's vandalism. The fabricated evidence was sophisticated enough to fool casual inspection. Blake had spent months preparing this nuclear option, knowing that destroying Cora's career would leave her financially helpless and professionally ruined. Patricia's face showed the strain of wanting to believe Cora while facing potential liability issues. "I'm going to need you to take some time off. Just until this gets resolved." The words hit like a physical blow. Blake hadn't just stolen money, he was systematically dismantling every foundation of Cora's life. Her marriage, her home security, her career, all under siege. Walking to her car in the office parking garage, Cora felt the first crack in her armor. Blake's plan was working. The careful, methodical destruction of her life was proceeding exactly as he'd designed. But in the darkness of the parking garage, something else crystallized. Blake's overconfidence had made him sloppy. Every fake piece of evidence he'd created could be forensically analyzed. Every lie he'd told could be cross-referenced with digital records. She wasn't just fighting for her reputation anymore. She was fighting for her survival. And survival was something Cora understood better than Blake would ever realize. The real war was about to begin. Blake's assault reached its climax when Rebecca's family joined forces with the Thompsons. Rebecca's mother, Helen Martinez, launched a secondary attack through their church community. Her story painted Cora as a vindictive woman who'd stolen Blake's belongings and money out of spite, leaving the newlyweds homeless and destitute. The religious angle was particularly damaging. Helen's version cast Rebecca and Blake as star-crossed lovers whose true marriage, blessed by God, was being persecuted by a bitter woman who refused to accept divine will. The narrative found fertile ground in conservative circles where Blake and Rebecca were seen as victims of a vindictive ex-wife who couldn't let go. Donations poured in for the young couple starting fresh, while Cora was painted as the villain standing in the way of true love. Meanwhile, Blake escalated his legal warfare. He filed for a restraining order, claiming Cora had threatened him and Rebecca. The fake evidence he'd manufactured, the doctored texts, the staged voicemails, the fabricated vandalism photos, looked convincing to a judge who had 15 minutes to review the case. The temporary restraining order was granted. Suddenly, Cora couldn't contact Blake directly, couldn't approach within 500 feet of him or Rebecca, and faced criminal charges if she violated the terms. Her ability to defend herself was legally constrained while Blake's campaign of character destruction continued unchecked. The financial pressure intensified when Blake convinced their shared acquaintances that Cora had stolen his money. Several friends demanded she return funds they believed she'd taken illegally. Her social circle collapsed as people chose Blake's version of events over her protests of innocence. Worst of all, Patricia called with devastating news. "I'm sorry, Cora, but we're going to have to let you go. The restraining order, the accusations, our clients are nervous about the firm's reputation." 6 years of career building, destroyed. Her professional reputation, shattered. Her financial security, evaporating. Blake's plan was succeeding beyond his wildest calculations. Sitting in her condo that evening, Cora faced the brutal reality: she was losing. Every move she made was countered by Blake's systematic campaign. Every defense was overwhelmed by his prepared assault. But in that moment of deepest despair, Marcus knocked on her door with a laptop bag and a grim smile. Time to show these people what real warfare looks like. Marcus spread his laptop across Cora's dining table like a general planning invasion. Blake's been using public Wi-Fi for his fake evidence creation, Marcus explained, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. Every doctored photo, every fabricated text message, every piece of manufactured evidence, he created it all from the same coffee shop near Rebecca's apartment. The digital forensics were devastating. Metadata from Blake's fake screenshots showed creation dates, software used, and even the specific computer that generated them. His threatening voicemails were created using voice synthesis software, with digital fingerprints pointing directly to his personal laptop. But Marcus had found something even more damaging: Blake's real communications with Rebecca, recovered from cloud backups he'd forgotten to delete. The recovered messages revealed the full scope of his deception campaign. Phase 1 complete, got the restraining order. Now I file for emergency spousal support while she can't defend herself. My lawyer says we can claim she's hiding assets and demand disclosure of everything she owns. Rebecca, baby, once we get her money, we can pay off your student loans and buy that house in Phoenix. She'll be financially destroyed and professionally ruined. Sweet revenge for all those years she made me feel small. The messages revealed Blake's master plan: use the legal system to strip Cora of everything while positioning himself and Rebecca for financial gain. The bigamy, the fake evidence, the social media campaign, all calculated moves designed to destroy Cora completely. But Blake had made one fatal error. His communications with his divorce attorney were discoverable. His strategy sessions with Margaret and Ashley were recorded on devices that automatically backed up to cloud storage. His entire conspiracy was documented in digital evidence he'd never considered vulnerable. Marcus had spent 3 days assembling what he called Blake's complete confession: hundreds of pages of recovered messages, metadata analysis, financial records, and timestamped evidence showing the systematic nature of his fraud. Here's what we're going to do, Marcus said, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. We're going to give Blake exactly what he wants: a public trial. But instead of destroying you, it's going to expose him for the criminal he really is. Cora studied the evidence, feeling power return to her voice. When? Tomorrow. Blake's planning another social media blitz to coincide with his emergency hearing. He wants maximum publicity for his victim narrative. Marcus's smile was sharp as winter wind. Let's give him all the attention he can handle. Blake's emergency hearing for spousal support was scheduled for 2 p.m. on Friday. He'd orchestrated maximum drama: Margaret and Ashley in the gallery, Rebecca by his side, and what he thought would be a defenseless Cora representing herself. He'd even tipped off a local news crew, hoping to generate sympathy coverage about the young entrepreneur fighting his vindictive ex-wife for survival. Blake entered the courtroom like a conquering hero, confident in his manufactured evidence and prepared testimony. His lawyer, a sleek operator named Richard Brennan, had coached him on playing the victim, broken man seeking justice from an abusive woman who'd stolen his life. Cora sat alone at the defendant's table, looking exactly like what Blake expected: isolated, overwhelmed, defeated. She'd dressed simply, carried only a single folder, and hadn't even hired an attorney. Blake's testimony was a masterpiece of manipulation. He painted Cora as a controlling abuser who'd isolated him from family, monitored his every move, and stolen money from their joint accounts. His voice cracked with practiced emotion as he described years of psychological torture and his desperate escape to find real love with Rebecca. The judge, Honorable Patricia Coleman, seemed sympathetic. The restraining order evidence, the fake text messages, Blake's convincing performance, it all supported his narrative of escaping domestic abuse. When Blake's lawyer rested their case, Judge Coleman turned to Cora. Ms. Davis, you have the right to cross-examine the witness and present your defense. Cora stood slowly, opened her folder, and pulled out a single flash drive. Your Honor, I'd like to present digital evidence that directly contradicts Mr. Thompson's testimony. Blake's confident smirk faltered. He hadn't expected Cora to have any evidence. His campaign had been designed to isolate her completely. Marcus had prepared the presentation like a surgical strike. The courtroom screens filled with Blake's recovered messages, timestamped and verified. His mocking conversations with Rebecca about pathetic Cora played out in brutal detail. "She's working double shifts to pay for my certification courses while I spend the money on our weekend getaways. She's so clueless she actually thinks I'm grateful." The judge's expression shifted from sympathy to disgust as Blake's true character emerged from his own words. But the real devastation came with the fake evidence analysis. Marcus's forensic breakdown showed exactly how Blake had manufactured every piece of proof supporting his abuse claims. The metadata didn't lie. Every doctored screenshot, every synthesized voicemail, every staged photo traced directly back to Blake's devices. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Coleman's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade, "did you create fake evidence to support your claims of abuse?" Blake's face went white. His lawyer frantically whispered in his ear, but the digital evidence was irrefutable. The final blow came when Cora played Blake's recorded conversation with his attorney, discussing their strategy to financially destroy her through fraudulent legal claims. Judge Coleman's gavel struck with finality. "This court finds overwhelming evidence of perjury, fraud, and abuse of process. Mr. Thompson, you will face criminal charges for filing false police reports and manufacturing evidence. Your restraining order is dismissed, and you are ordered to pay Mrs. Davis's legal costs." But Blake's humiliation was just beginning. The news crew he'd invited captured every moment of his exposure. Within hours, his victim story transformed into a viral showcase of his criminality. 6 months later, Cora stood in the lobby of Denver's premier accounting firm, accepting a position that doubled her previous salary. Blake's criminal trial had been swift and brutal. Perjury, fraud, filing false police reports, the charges accumulated like avalanche debris. His 3-month jail sentence was just the beginning. The civil lawsuit for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress would follow him for years. Rebecca had disappeared before the criminal charges were filed, their Vegas marriage annulled when Blake's bigamy conviction made headlines. Margaret and Ashley faced their own legal troubles for participating in the defamation campaign. The family that had seemed so united in destroying Cora scattered like leaves when consequences arrived. Blake's employer had fired him immediately after his arrest. His professional certifications, the ones Cora had paid for, were revoked. The man who tried to steal everything from his wife found himself unemployable and financially ruined. But Cora's victory carried shadows. The months of warfare had changed her, hardened something that used to be soft. She'd won completely, yet the cost was visible in the mirror, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, a wariness that colored even happy moments. Her new life was undeniably better. The downtown condo, the prestigious job, the respect of colleagues who'd watched her fight back from professional destruction, all evidence that truth eventually surfaced. But she sometimes wondered what might have been if Blake had simply asked for a divorce instead of choosing systematic destruction. Marcus had become more than a friend, their shared battle creating bonds that felt unbreakable. "No regrets?" he asked over dinner at her favorite restaurant. Cora considered the question while watching Denver's lights sparkle below their window table. "Blake chose to destroy me instead of leaving me. He orchestrated his campaign to take everything, my money, my career, my reputation, my sanity. What happened to him wasn't revenge. It was justice." She raised her wine glass in a private toast. "To consequences finding the people who've earned them." The man who'd texted from Vegas thinking he'd won everything had lost it all instead. Sometimes the house doesn't always win, sometimes the house burns down with the gambler still inside. If this story of epic justice left you speechless, smash that like button, subscribe to Formidable Revenge channel for more incredible true stories, and tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Cora's situation? Thanks for watching, and remember, karma never forgets an address.